It's 2 AM, headphones on, everyone's asleep, and you finally get the low end to sit right. This is the track. Now picture that same track, a year later, playing to a field of 400,000 people at Tomorrowland. Between those two moments, your music runs through a chain of physics. Some of it is beautiful, some of it is brutal, and most producers have no idea if it's happening to their mix. So I read the actual papers. The ones the people who built the system use. And it turns out the biggest speakers on Earth are just the most honest test your mix will ever take. Your track has to survive the trip. 6 things stand between your bedroom and that crowd, and only the last one is yours to control. So keep one question in your head the whole way. Will the low end still be there when it lands? Start with a problem. Sounds get quiet with distance, fast. A normal speaker loses 6 decibels every time you double the distance. Twice as far away, a quarter of the power. By the back of a festival field, there should be almost nothing left. So why isn't the back of Tomorrowland dead? Look at the main stage. Those aren't big speakers. They're columns of small ones hung in a long curve. That shape is the whole trick. So here's the idea. One speaker pushes sound out like a balloon inflating, a sphere. And a sphere's surface grows with the square of the distance, so the same energy spreads over 4 times the area every time you double it. That's the 6 decibels. Okay, so now stack a lot of small speakers into a tall, tightly spaced line and keep them working together. The wavefront stops spreading like a balloon and starts spreading more like a cylinder, out to the sides, but barely up and down. And the cylinder surface grows just with distance, not distance squared. So the level falls off slower, closer to 3 decibels per doubling instead of 6. Okay, so let me just be straight with you, because the people who will build these will call it out if I'm not. This only holds when the boxes stay tightly coupled, only over part of the field, and it depends on the frequency and how tall the array is. It's not magic and it's not free. Curving the array to cover the whole crowd actually costs you a few decibels straight ahead. But the payoff is real, and over a long throw, 3 per doubling instead of 6 is the difference between punchy at the back and gone. And that's the first thing to sit with. The reason someone 5 meters away from someone 150 meters back can feel the same kick is a piece of geometry. It's not more power, it's shape. But that shape gets your sound to the back of the field. It's the lowest note it struggles with the most. So the low end gets a system all of its own, and that's where your mix actually gets judged. And this is the one thing that changes how you mix tonight. A subwoofer down at these frequencies is basically omnidirectional. It doesn't point anywhere. It fills space in every direction, including backwards, off the stage, toward the neighbors, and at Tomorrowland the neighbors are about 20 meters away with strict noise limits to stay under. So the engineers do something really clever. They take several subs, feed them one shared signal, and offset them in time and in polarity so the sound adds up going forward into the crowd and cancelled itself going backwards. In 2019, L'acoustique flew the subs behind the mains in what's called an end-fire array. They reported cut neighbor complaints by around 95%, that's their number. Not an independent measurement, but the mechanism underneath it is real. It's beautiful. Interference used on purpose. So here's the part that matters for you. All of that steering only works if every sub gets the same coherent signal, so the low end is mono, one feed. Not because you can't hear where bass comes from, that part is a myth, but because the physics of controlling bass wants a single correlated signal. So think back to that sub that shook your desk at 2 AM. Here's the test. If your low end has a stereo width down there, a little delay on the bass, a widener, an out of phase sample, it sounds huge in your headphones. But when that system folds it down to one mono feed, the out of phase parts cancel each other. So your bass doesn't just get narrower, it actually gets quieter. It loses weight on the exact system that was supposed to make it enormous. And it isn't only festivals. A club sub, a phone speaker, a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen, they all fold your low end toward mono. So here's the habit worth stealing from the people with the biggest speakers on earth. Check your low end in mono. If the weight disappears when you sum it, fix it before anyone else ever hears it. That's the entire reason I made Check, the plugin that I did, free. So say your low end survives. Mono, it's solid, it still has to cross the field, and the top end has an enemy you can't see, and that's the air itself. So ultimately, the air is an equalizer, and nobody set its curve. High frequencies get absorbed as they travel. The air turns a little of that sound energy into heat, and it does more the higher the frequency and the farther the sound goes across a big field. Past 100 meters, the top end measurably drops. The same system is bright up front and softer at the back, just from the air alone. And that's before anyone touches an EQ. And it moves. How much the air absorbs totally depends on the temperature and the humidity. And here's the strange part. Drier air often eats more treble, not less. So the weather is quietly re-EQing the show all day long. It's part of why the engineer out front is riding the top end all night, chasing a target that keeps on sliding. But here's an even stranger one. On a warm afternoon, the ground heats the air near the surface and sound bends upward, away from the crowd. At night, the ground cools. The air near it cools, the sound bends back down and hugs the ground. That's the real reason a festival or a distant train sounds louder and closer at night. It isn't quiet around you, the sound is being bent back down to you. So the lesson here for your mix is a more humbling one. Brightness is relative to where you're standing. That crisp top end you dialed in a foot from your monitors in a small room is partly a property of that room and that distance. It will not survive 100 meters of air, and it barely survives a car. So reference on other systems as well, because your room is lying to you about the top the same way it lies about the bottom. So okay, the air fins your top end on the way in. There's one test left, and it's the toughest crowd of all, their ears. And this one happens inside of your head. Your ears are not a flat measurement mic. At low volume, they're much less sensitive to bass and to the far top. Turn the same track up and your sensitivity to the low end comes forward a lot. This is part of why a festival feels so full. At that level, your own hearing is handing you a bass you barely noticed when it was quiet. But be careful how you say this to yourself though. The volume is not adding low end that wasn't there. The low end was always in the track. Turning it up just let your ears hear more of what was already there. Same recording, different ears. Which is of course a trap when you mix. Mix your bass quietly at 2 AM, ears underreporting the low end, and you'll compensate. You push the bass up, and the next day in the car it's a boomy mess. Only ever check loud, and you underdo it. The fix is boring and it works. Check your balance at a few honest levels, not one, and not whisper quiet. The other half of loud is clean. And here I'm giving you my opinion as much as the physics. A great big system isn't just loud. It's loud without hurting, distortion, clipping, a smash limiter. All of it adds harshness right where your ears are most sensitive, around 3 to 4 kilohertz. And your brain reads that harshness as too loud, so you turn it down. A clean system with headroom can play genuinely louder and still feel effortless, because there's nothing gritty for your ear to flinch at. So when you flatten your master with a limiter to make it feel bigger, On a real system, you might be doing the opposite. The clean version with headroom is the one that can actually get loud. Loud and clean beats loud and crushed. That's the whole reason I don't build magic loudness buttons. So that's the whole gauntlet. The array, the mono subs, the air, the crowd's ears. Now here's the part that's actually yours. So let's go back to that bedroom track and try and add it all up. On its way to the main stage, your music passes through a curved column of speakers doing geometry to reach the back of the field. Through a wall of subwoofers steered by interference and fed in mono, through 100 meters of air that's eating your top end and bending at night, and finally through the ears of 400,000 people whose sensitivity to your low end depends on how loud it is. You don't control any of that. You never touch the rig, you can't change the weather, you can't rewrite how hearing works. But try and look at what all of this has in common. Every stage of that journey is hardest on the low end and on the phase. The array struggles most with the lows, the subs demand a coherent mono signal, the air and the ears reshape the balance around it. The one thing you hand the system, your mix, gets just first and hardest down at the bottom. So will the low end still be there when it lands? That's the one thing you control completely. A low end that's mono compatible in phase with honest red room survives all of it. The festival, the club, the car, the phone, because the festival isn't a special case. It's just the most extreme version of the same test every system runs on your music. You made it at 2 AM in your bedroom. The biggest speakers on earth don't care where you made it. They only care what you handed them. So hand them something that holds together at the bottom and it'll hold together everywhere. And that's the whole secret the biggest system in the world can teach a producer in a bedroom. Check your low end. Keep it clean. The rest is just physics doing its job.